The dust hadn't even settled when Maria Rodriguez knew something was terribly wrong. The scream that tore through the humid Texas air at the Uvalde County Fairgrounds wasn't the usual whoop of excitement that accompanied a successful 8-second ride. This was primal, desperate, the kind of sound that freezes blood and stops conversations mid-sentence. Her 8-year-old daughter Sophia gripped her arm with surprising strength, small fingers digging into flesh as they both stared at the motionless figure sprawled in the center of the arena. Lightning McKenzie lay crumpled against the arena wall like a broken doll, his body twisted at angles that made Maria's nursing instincts scream warnings. 1,500 pounds of pure muscle and fury named Thunder Strike stood pawing the ground nearby, still snorting and agitated from the ride that had just ended in catastrophe. The bull's massive frame cast a shadow over the fallen rider, creating an image that would be burned into the memory of every person present at the 2025 CPRA Rodeo Championship Finals. 6 hours earlier, the atmosphere had been completely different. The parking lot outside the fairgrounds buzzed with the familiar energy that defined rodeo culture in South Texas. Pickup trucks with gleaming chrome bumpers and oversized tires competed for space with horse trailers bearing the logos of ranches from across the region. Families dressed in their finest Western wear, starched shirts, polished boots, and hats that had seen generations of use, made their way through the gates carrying folding chairs and coolers filled with homemade refreshments. The Rodriguez family had driven nearly 2 hours from their home in San Antonio specifically for this event. Maria worked double shifts at Methodist Hospital to afford these rare family outings, and tonight represented weeks of anticipation for Sophia, whose bedroom walls were covered with pictures of barrel racers and bull riders. The little girl had been talking nonstop about the rodeo for days, practicing her cheers and asking endless questions about the different events they would witness. "Mama, will we really see cowboys riding bulls tonight?" Sophia had asked for the 100th time as they walked through the entrance gates, her eyes wide with excitement as she took in the sights and sounds surrounding them. The smell of barbacoa and fresh tortillas from the food vendors mixed with the earthy scent of hay and leather, creating that unmistakable atmosphere that defined authentic Texas rodeo culture. "Yes, Mija, and we're going to see some of the best riders in the country," Maria replied, adjusting the small cooler she carried while guiding Sophia through the crowd. She had researched the competitors online, learning that tonight's roster included several riders ranked in the top 10 nationally, including Lightning McKenzie, whose reputation for reading bulls had made him a favorite among serious rodeo fans. They found their seats in Section C, Row 12, surrounded by other families who had made rodeo attendance a multi-generational tradition. To their left sat Earl Patterson, a retired rancher whose weathered hands and knowing eyes spoke of decades spent working with livestock. His grandson Tyler, a high school senior who competed in junior rodeo events, leaned forward eagerly as Earl pointed out various competitors and explained the finer points of bull riding technique. "You see that young man over there in the blue shirt?" Earl said, gesturing toward the competitor area where riders were preparing their equipment. "That's Lightning McKenzie. Been watching him ride for 3 years now, and I've never seen anyone read a bull's movement patterns the way he does. He's got an instinct for it that you can't teach." Tyler nodded respectfully, absorbing every word of wisdom his grandfather offered. At 17, he was already being recruited by colleges with strong rodeo programs, but he knew that professional success required the kind of intuitive understanding that separated good riders from great ones. Watching McKenzie prepare for his ride on Thunder Strike would be like attending a master class in the art of bull riding. In the competitor area behind the chutes, McKenzie was indeed preparing with the methodical precision that had made him legendary among his peers. At 26, he was considered a veteran on the CPRA circuit, having earned his nickname not just for his quick reflexes, but for his ability to anticipate a bull's next move with uncanny accuracy. His calloused hands wrapped around his leather rigging as he went through the mental preparation routine that had never failed him in 8 years of professional competition. Thunder Strike waited in chute number 4, his massive gray frame filling the narrow space as stock handlers made final adjustments to the rigging. The bull belonged to the prestigious Lone Star Bucking Stock Company and had developed a reputation as one of the most challenging rides in professional rodeo. At 1,500 pounds of pure muscle and attitude, Thunder Strike had maintained an 87% buck-off rate throughout the current season, with only 2 riders managing to stay mounted for the required 8 seconds. "He's studying you, Lightning," called out Jake Morrison, a veteran bullfighter who had worked with McKenzie at dozens of events over the years. "I've been watching that bull, and he pays attention to how each rider gets set. He's smart enough to adjust his strategy based on what he sees." McKenzie nodded, appreciating the insight while continuing his preparation ritual. He visualized the ride from start to finish, imagining Thunderstrike's likely responses to different situations and planning his own adjustments accordingly. Mental preparation was as crucial as physical conditioning in professional bull riding, and McKenzie's ability to think 3 moves ahead had saved him from serious injury more times than he could count. In the announcer's booth high above the arena, veteran commentator Big Jim Thompson tested his microphone while reviewing detailed notes about each competitor. At 54, Big Jim had called rodeos across Texas for over 2 decades, his booming voice becoming as synonymous with the sport as the riders themselves. He wore his signature black cowboy hat and turquoise BOLO tie, gifts from grateful rodeo committees who recognized his contribution to the entertainment value of their events. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a special treat for you tonight," Big Jim announced to the crowd as the preliminary events concluded. "Our featured matchup pits Lightning McKenzie, currently ranked 3rd in the CPRA standings, against Thunderstrike, a bull that has defeated some of the best riders in the business. This is the kind of competition that defines championship rodeo." The crowd responded with enthusiastic cheers, creating a wall of sound that seemed to energize the very air around the arena. Parents lifted small children onto their shoulders for better views, while vendors moved through the stands making final sales before the main event. The anticipation was palpable, electric, the kind of energy that made rodeo unlike any other form of entertainment. Dr. Sarah Williams stood ready in the medical station located directly behind the chutes, her trauma kit organized with the efficiency that came from 15 years of emergency medicine experience. As a surgeon at the Regional Medical Center, she volunteered her time at rodeo events throughout South Texas, understanding better than most the inherent risks involved in the sport. Her presence provided insurance that serious injuries could receive immediate professional attention, though she prayed her services would remain unnecessary. "I've been watching video of Thunderstrike's recent performances," Dr. Williams mentioned to the paramedic team that always accompanied her to these events. "His buck-off pattern tends to involve a lot of spinning and sudden direction changes. We need to be ready for potential head and neck injuries if a rider gets caught off guard." The medical team nodded, their expressions reflecting the serious nature of their responsibility. While rodeo injuries were relatively rare, their severity could be life-changing when they occurred. Dr. Williams had treated everything from broken bones to spinal cord injuries over the years, and she approached each event with the knowledge that 8 seconds of competition could alter a young athlete's life forever. As the moment for McKenzie's ride approached, Jessica Morrison, his girlfriend of 3 years, took her position in the competitor section where riders' families traditionally watched the action. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap as she fought the pre-ride nerves that never seemed to diminish despite her experience with McKenzie's career. She had witnessed hundreds of his rides, but the knowledge that each one carried inherent danger never allowed her to watch with complete comfort. "He looks confident tonight," said Rachel Davis, whose husband competed in the steer wrestling event. "I've never seen Lightning more focused than he's been this season. If anyone can handle Thunderstrike, it's him." Jessica nodded, grateful for the support of the rodeo community that had become her extended family over the years. The bonds formed between competitor families were strong and genuine, forged by shared understanding of the sacrifices and risks involved in pursuing professional rodeo careers. Tonight, all of those relationships would be tested in ways none of them could anticipate. The first several bull riders of the evening had provided quality entertainment without achieving the 8-second mark required for qualifying scores. The crowd had been appreciative but restless, waiting for the featured matchup that would determine championship standings going into the final month of the season. As McKenzie climbed onto the chute rails, the noise level in the arena increased dramatically, reflecting the audience's understanding that they were about to witness something special. Thunderstrike stood motionless in the narrow chute, his massive frame coiled with barely contained energy. Stock handlers made final adjustments to ensure rider safety, while the bull's dark eyes seemed to study every movement around him. Some observers swore they could see intelligence in those eyes, a calculating awareness that made Thunderstrike particularly dangerous for riders who underestimated his mental capabilities. "Take your time, Lightning," called Frank Morrison, owner of Lone Star Bucking Stock Company, from his position near the chutes. Despite owning the bull that would attempt to defeat McKenzie, Morrison respected the rider's skill and wanted to see a fair competition that showcased both athlete and animal at their best. McKenzie settled onto Thunderstrike's back with the fluid motion that marked an experienced professional. His left hand gripped the rigging with precisely the right amount of tension while his right arm extended for balance, already anticipating the explosive movement that would begin the moment the chute gate opened. His body language reflected confidence without arrogance, the demeanor of an athlete who had prepared thoroughly for the challenge ahead. The arena fell into the hushed anticipation that preceded every bull ride, 3,000 spectators holding their collective breath as they waited for the gate to open. Parents unconsciously moved closer to their children, while experienced rodeo fans leaned forward in their seats, their knowledge of the sport telling them they were about to witness either triumph or disaster with very little middle ground between the two outcomes. Big Jim Thompson's voice carried clearly across the fairgrounds as he provided final commentary before the ride began. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what championship bull riding looks like. Lightning McKenzie versus Thunderstrike, 8 seconds that could define the rest of the season for both rider and bull. The gate operator waited for McKenzie's nod, the signal that would release 1,500 pounds of controlled fury into the arena. When it came, the metallic clang of the opening gate seemed to reverberate through the souls of everyone present, marking the beginning of a ride that would be remembered long after the arena lights were turned off and the fairgrounds fell silent. Thunderstrike exploded from chute number 4 with a violence that surprised even the most experienced observers, his massive hindquarters launching skyward as McKenzie fought to maintain his seat against forces that defied normal comprehension. For those first crucial seconds, rider and bull seemed locked in perfect combat, each responding to the other's movements with split-second timing that elevated the competition to the level of art. The explosion from chute number 4 sent shockwaves through the arena that seemed to vibrate in the chest of every spectator. Thunderstrike's massive frame uncoiled like a spring loaded with 1,500 pounds of pure fury, his hindquarters driving skyward with such force that several people in the front rows instinctively recoiled. Lightning McKenzie's body moved in perfect harmony with the bull's initial movements, his right arm extended for balance while his left hand maintained its death grip on the rigging that represented his only connection to survival. For the first 3 seconds, everything appeared textbook perfect. McKenzie's form was flawless, his shoulders square, and his weight distributed exactly as countless hours of practice had programmed into his muscle memory. Thunderstrike bucked and spun with the controlled violence that had made him legendary, but McKenzie seemed to anticipate every movement, his body flowing with the bull's rhythm like a dancer who had memorized the steps to a deadly choreography. Perfect position. Big Jim Thompson's voice boomed across the fairgrounds, his experienced eye recognizing the quality of riding on display. Lightning McKenzie is showing exactly why he's ranked 3rd in the CPRA standings. Look at that form, folks, textbook bull riding at its finest. In Section C, Row 12, Maria Rodriguez found herself holding her breath despite her intention to remain calm for Sophia's sake. Her daughter pressed against her side, small hands gripping the wooden bleacher seat as she witnessed her first professional bull ride. The little girl's eyes were wide with amazement at the display of courage and athleticism taking place just yards away from where they sat, completely unaware that she was watching the opening movements of a tragedy that would haunt her dreams for years to come. Earl Patterson leaned forward in his seat, his experienced eye analyzing every nuance of McKenzie's technique. "Watch how he keeps his shoulders square," he whispered to his grandson Tyler, his voice barely audible over the crowd noise. "That's what separates the good riders from the great ones. He's not fighting the bull, he's moving with him. That's pure instinct you're watching, son." Tyler nodded, absorbing every detail of the masterclass unfolding before them. As a junior competitor himself, he understood the incredible skill required to maintain balance and control under such extreme conditions. McKenzie's ride represented everything Tyler aspired to achieve in his own career. A perfect example of how preparation and natural ability could combine to create moments of athletic brilliance. At the 4-second mark, Thunderstrike began the spinning sequence that had defeated so many riders before McKenzie. The bull planted his front hooves and whipped his massive frame in tight circles, creating centrifugal forces that would challenge even the most accomplished athletes. The sound of his hooves hitting the arena floor created a rhythmic thunder that seemed to match the heartbeats of everyone watching. McKenzie adjusted his grip and shifted his weight with practiced precision, maintaining his precarious balance as the world spun around him in a blur of motion and sound. His free arm worked like a rudder, making constant micro-adjustments to compensate for Thunderstrike's unpredictable movements. Sweat beaded on his forehead beneath his protective helmet, but his expression remained focused and determined. "He's got him figured out," shouted a voice from the competitor section, where other riders watched with professional appreciation for McKenzie's performance. The comment reflected the growing excitement among those who understood the technical difficulty of what they were witnessing. Thunderstrike was giving McKenzie his best effort, but the rider seemed equal to every challenge the bull could present. Dr. Sarah Williams watched intently from her position near the medical station, her trained eye monitoring both rider and bull for any signs of the unexpected. Something about Thunderstrike's movement pattern seemed different tonight, more intense than the videos she had studied in preparation for the event. The bull's previous performances had been aggressive but predictable. Tonight he seemed to possess an extra level of determination that made her unconsciously check her medical kit one more time. Jake Morrison, the veteran bullfighter whose job was to protect fallen riders, positioned himself strategically near the arena wall. His years of experience told him that McKenzie was riding exceptionally well, but he also recognized the increased aggression in Thunderstrike's performance. The bull's movements seemed more calculated tonight, as if he had specifically prepared for this particular rider. "Something's different about this bull tonight," Morrison muttered to his partner, never taking his eyes off the action in the center of the arena. "He's been studying video of Lightning's previous rides. I can see it in the way he's changing his pattern." At the 5-second mark, Thunderstrike attempted a maneuver that had never appeared in his previous performances. A sudden leap combined with a mid-air direction change that caught McKenzie completely off guard. The bull's massive body became airborne for a split second, hanging suspended above the arena floor before crashing down with tremendous force. McKenzie's carefully maintained balance was thrown into chaos as his body was whipped violently to one side. The crowd's cheers transformed into gasps of concern as they witnessed McKenzie struggling to regain control. His right hand flew wildly as he fought to stay centered on Thunderstrike's back, but the bull's unexpected movement had created forces that exceeded even his considerable skill level. For the first time in the ride, McKenzie looked vulnerable, his usual confidence replaced by desperate determination to survive. Jessica McKenzie shot to her feet in the competitor section, her hands covering her mouth as she watched her boyfriend's ride deteriorate before her eyes. Around her, other riders and stock contractors stood frozen, their experience telling them that what they were witnessing had moved beyond the realm of normal rodeo competition into something far more dangerous. "Come on, Lightning!" Jessica screamed, her voice barely audible over the crowd noise. "You've got this. Stay with him." Her encouragement was lost in the chaos of sound that filled the arena, but her anguish was shared by hundreds of spectators who had developed emotional investments in McKenzie's success. Rodeo crowds were knowledgeable enough to recognize exceptional skill when they saw it, and McKenzie's reputation had earned him fans throughout Texas who wanted to see him succeed. At the 6-second mark, Thunderstrike made the decision that would alter the course of multiple lives forever. Instead of continuing his established pattern, the bull suddenly reversed his spinning direction with explosive force, a move that violated every expectation based on his previous performances. The change in momentum was so violent and unexpected that McKenzie's carefully planned adjustments became liabilities that pulled him further off balance. Earl Patterson's weathered hands gripped the bleacher seat as he recognized the danger developing before them. "Oh no," he whispered, his voice carrying a weight of understanding that comes from witnessing too many rodeo accidents over the decades. "That bull just changed the rules of the game." Tyler heard his grandfather's comment and felt a chill run down his spine despite the warm Texas evening. He had never seen Earl look worried during a bull ride before, and the old man's concern was more frightening than anything happening in the arena. The teenager's dreams of professional rodeo competition suddenly seemed less appealing as he watched his hero struggling against forces beyond human control. McKenzie's left hand lost its grip on the rigging just as Thunderstrike launched into another violent buck, this one accompanied by a twisting motion that sent the rider sliding down the bull's massive flank. The crowd's noise level dropped to an eerie quiet as thousands of people simultaneously realized they were witnessing something that had moved far beyond entertainment into the realm of potential tragedy. The 7-second mark passed with McKenzie clinging desperately to Thunderstrike's side, his body position completely compromised but his determination undiminished. He fought to regain his seat with every ounce of strength and skill he possessed, but Thunderstrike's relentless assault made recovery impossible. The bull seemed to sense his advantage and pressed it mercilessly, his movements becoming even more violent and unpredictable. Big Jim Thompson's microphone went silent as he processed what was unfolding before him. His decades of experience calling rodeos had prepared him for many situations, but the severity of what he was witnessing left him momentarily speechless. The arena lights seemed to intensify the stark reality of McKenzie's desperate situation, highlighting every detail of a struggle that was rapidly moving beyond the athlete's ability to control. The 8-second buzzer sounded just as McKenzie's body separated completely from Thunderstrike, but instead of the celebration that should have accompanied a qualified ride, the arena fell into a silence so complete that the sound of the bull's hooves on the arena floor echoed like gunshots. McKenzie's trajectory carried him directly into the path of Thunderstrike's continued bucking, and the collision that followed would be replayed in the minds of everyone present for the rest of their lives. The impact between McKenzie's falling body and Thunderstrike's ascending hindquarters created a sound that defied description. Part collision, part explosion, part breaking of something that should never break. The force of the contact sent McKenzie spinning through the air like a rag doll, his protective gear providing no defense against the tremendous forces involved in the accident. Thunderstrike, still in his bucking frenzy and unaware of what had occurred, continued his violent movements as McKenzie's body crashed to the arena floor with a thud that seemed to shake the very foundations of the fairgrounds. The bull's massive hooves came dangerously close to the fallen rider as Jake Morrison and his partner rushed to intervene, their training taking over despite the shock of what they had witnessed. Maria Rodriguez instinctively pulled Sofia closer, shielding her daughter's view as much as possible while her own eyes remained fixed on the motionless figure in the center of the arena. Around them, other parents made similar gestures, trying to protect their children from witnessing something that had clearly moved beyond entertainment into territory no family should have to experience. "Is the cowboy hurt, Mama?" Sophia's small voice cut through the silence like a knife, her innocent question highlighting the tragic transformation of what was supposed to be a celebration of athletic skill and courage. The 8-year-old's voice carried clearly in the hushed arena, heard by dozens of nearby spectators who were struggling with their own attempts to process what had just occurred. Dr. Williams was already running toward the arena before Thunderstrike had been guided back toward the stock pens. Her medical bag bounced against her hip as she sprinted across the sandy surface, her mind automatically shifting into trauma protocol mode despite the emotional impact of what she had witnessed. Behind her, paramedics followed with emergency equipment, their faces grim with the understanding that this was no routine rodeo injury. The silence that had fallen over the crowd was broken only by Dr. Williams's voice as she began her initial assessment of McKenzie's condition. Her training allowed her to compartmentalize the emotional impact of the situation while focusing on the medical realities she faced, but even her professional demeanor couldn't completely mask the gravity of what she discovered during those first crucial minutes. McKenzie lay motionless in the center of the arena, his body positioned at angles that made experienced medical professionals wince. Blood seeped from multiple wounds while his breathing remained shallow and irregular. Dr. Williams's initial examination revealed injuries that went far beyond the broken bones and concussions that were unfortunate but expected parts of rodeo competition. "We need life flight immediately," Dr. Williams called out to the paramedic team, her voice carrying clearly in the hushed arena. The request sent a chill through every person within hearing distance, confirming what many had already suspected about the severity of McKenzie's condition. The helicopter that would transport him to San Antonio represented his only chance for the kind of immediate trauma care his injuries required. Thunderstrike had been successfully guided back to the stock pens, but his earlier aggression seemed to linger in the air like an ominous presence. The bull showed no signs of distress or unusual behavior now, grazing peacefully on hay while seemingly unaware of the chaos his performance had created. The contrast between his current calm and his recent violence highlighted the unpredictable nature of the animals that made rodeo competition both thrilling and terrifying. Frank Morrison stood at the arena fence, his weathered face reflecting the weight of responsibility he felt for the evening's tragic turn. In 30 years of providing stock for rodeos across Texas, he had never witnessed anything quite like Thunderstrike's performance. The bull's unexpected aggression and calculated violence went beyond normal bovine responses to competitive stress, raising questions that would haunt the stock contractor for months to come. As the emergency helicopter's distinctive sound began to echo across the fairgrounds, the remaining crowd stood in respectful silence. Many removed their hats in a gesture of respect for the fallen rider, while others bowed their heads in prayer for his recovery. The festive atmosphere that had defined the evening's early hours had been completely replaced by a somber recognition of the thin line between triumph and tragedy that defined professional rodeo competition. The arena lights cast harsh shadows across the medical team as they worked with practiced efficiency around McKenzie's still form. Every movement was calculated and precise, designed to stabilize his condition for transport without aggravating injuries that could prove fatal if mishandled. The sight of so much medical equipment and personnel in the center of what was supposed to be an entertainment venue created a surreal tableau that would be remembered long after the physical evidence had been cleaned away. The helicopter's rotors created a whirlwind of dust and debris as it settled onto the makeshift landing zone that had been hastily cleared in the fairgrounds parking lot. The medical team worked with practiced urgency to transfer Lightning McKenzie from the ambulance gurney to the aircraft's specialized stretcher, every movement calculated to prevent further damage to injuries that had already crossed the threshold from serious to potentially life-threatening. Dr. Sarah Williams climbed into the helicopter beside her patient, her face grim with the knowledge that the next hour would determine whether McKenzie lived or died. Severe head trauma, multiple fractures, possible internal bleeding, she reported to the flight crew over the noise of the engines spinning up to takeoff speed. "We need to get him to University Hospital Trauma Center immediately. Every minute counts now." As the helicopter lifted off into the Texas night sky, its red and blue lights painting the fairgrounds in alternating colors, the 3,000 spectators who remained stood in stunned silence. Many had been attending rodeos for decades without witnessing anything approaching the severity of McKenzie's accident. The sight of a young athlete being airlifted from what was supposed to be family entertainment had shattered assumptions about acceptable risk that had defined rodeo culture for generations. Big Jim Thompson finally found his voice again as the aircraft disappeared over the horizon, its navigation lights blinking like distant stars against the dark sky. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said quietly into his microphone, his usual booming enthusiasm replaced by a gravity that reflected the evening's tragic turn. "Our thoughts and prayers go out to Lightning McKenzie and his family during this difficult time. We're going to suspend the remainder of tonight's competition out of respect for Bobby and concern for his recovery." The announcement prompted a wave of murmured agreement from the remaining spectators, many of whom had been hoping for exactly that decision. The idea of continuing with entertainment after witnessing such a serious accident felt inappropriate to the close-knit rodeo community that had gathered to celebrate their shared passion for the sport. Parents gathered their children and belongings in subdued quiet, the earlier excitement completely replaced by the need to process what they had experienced together. In Section C, Row 12, Maria Rodriguez helped Sophia collect her small backpack and the stuffed horse she had brought to the rodeo. The 8-year-old moved slowly, her earlier enthusiasm completely dampened by witnessing something that her young mind struggled to comprehend. The contrast between the cowboy she had been cheering for minutes earlier and the broken figure who had been carried away by helicopter was too vast for childhood understanding to bridge. "Mama, why did the bull hurt the cowboy?" Sophia asked as they made their way toward the parking lot, her small hand gripping Maria's fingers with unusual intensity. "I thought they were just playing a game." The question hung in the air between them, highlighting the difficulty of explaining adult realities to a child who had come seeking adventure and entertainment. Maria struggled to find words that would provide honest answers without creating unnecessary fear or confusion about the complex relationship between humans and animals that defined rodeo culture. "Sometimes accidents happen, Mija, even when everyone is trying to be safe," Maria replied carefully, deciding that truth was more appropriate than false reassurance. The bull wasn't trying to hurt anyone. Animals don't think like people do. But the cowboy knew there was danger when he decided to ride, and sometimes things go wrong even when everyone does their best. The conversation represented one of those parenting moments that couldn't be planned for, when real life intrudes on childhood innocence in ways that demand careful handling. As they reached their car, Maria realized that Sophia's first rodeo experience had become an unexpected lesson about risk, consequence, and the sometimes harsh realities that existed beneath the surface of seemingly simple entertainment. Earl Patterson and his grandson Tyler remained in their seats longer than most other spectators, the old rancher's experience telling him that they had witnessed something that would fundamentally change rodeo culture in ways they couldn't yet fully comprehend. In his 43 years of attending these events, he had developed a deep appreciation for the sport's traditions and values, but he also understood that serious injuries forced difficult conversations about safety and risk that the rodeo community could no longer avoid. "Grandpa, should I still want to ride bulls?" Tyler asked, his voice reflecting the uncertainty that many young competitors would face in the wake of McKenzie's accident. The question struck at the heart of rodeo culture, where the willingness to face danger had always been considered a fundamental part of the sport's appeal and character. Earl considered his response carefully, understanding that his words could influence his grandson's entire future trajectory. "That's something you'll need to decide for yourself, son," he said finally. "But what happened tonight doesn't change the fact that rodeo teaches courage, determination, and respect for animals and traditions that go back generations. Every sport has risks, and every athlete has to decide if the rewards, the personal growth, the community, the skills you develop, are worth those risks." The conversation would continue during their drive home and in the days that followed, representing the broader challenge facing the entire rodeo community in the wake of McKenzie's accident. Young competitors across Texas and beyond would be forced to reevaluate their commitment to a sport that had suddenly demonstrated its potential for life-altering consequences in the most dramatic way possible. Throughout the parking lot, similar conversations were taking place as families processed what they had witnessed together. Parents who had brought their children to introduce them to rodeo culture found themselves reconsidering the appropriateness of the sport as family entertainment. The accident had transformed what was supposed to be a celebration of Texas heritage and athletic skill into a stark reminder of the physical dangers that professional athletes face in pursuit of their dreams and livelihood. Jessica McKenzie sat in her pickup truck in the competitor parking area, her hands shaking as she tried to call Bobby's parents on her cell phone. The conversation would be one of the most difficult of her life, explaining to Tom and Linda McKenzie that their son had been critically injured while pursuing the career they had supported and encouraged since his teenage years. The weight of delivering such devastating news felt almost unbearable, especially when she herself didn't know the full extent of Bobby's injuries or his chances for recovery. "Mr. McKenzie, this is Jessica," she said when Tom finally answered the phone at their ranch outside Tulsa. "Bobby's been hurt at the rodeo tonight. It's serious. They're flying him to University Hospital in San Antonio. You need to get here as soon as possible." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds before Tom's voice came back, hoarse with shock and concern. "How bad is it, Jessica? Tell me the truth." "I don't know yet," Jessica replied honestly, tears flowing freely down her cheeks as she struggled to maintain composure. "It was a bad wreck with Thunderstrike. The doctors are doing everything they can, but you need to come now. I'll meet you at the hospital." The phone call would be repeated in various forms dozens of times that night as news of McKenzie's accident spread through the tight-knit rodeo community. Social media posts began appearing within minutes of the helicopter's departure, carrying word of the tragedy to competitors, fans, and industry professionals across the country. The CPRA would issue an official statement before midnight, acknowledging the severity of the accident while requesting privacy for McKenzie's family during their crisis. The stock contractors and rodeo officials gathered in the competitor area to discuss the immediate aftermath of the accident and its implications for future events. Thunderstrike's unexpected aggression would require investigation, though initial observations suggested that the bull's behavior, while unusual in its intensity, fell within the range of normal bovine responses to the stress and stimulation of competition. Frank Morrison stood apart from the group, his weathered face reflecting the complex emotions that came with owning the animal responsible for such a serious injury. "In 30 years of providing stock for rodeos across Texas and beyond, I've never seen anything quite like that," he said to anyone within earshot. "Thunderstrike has always been aggressive. That's what made him valuable as a bucking bull. But what happened tonight was different. More calculated, more violent than anything I've seen from him before." The decision about Thunderstrike's future in rodeo competition would ultimately be made in the days following the accident, but the immediate concern focused on supporting McKenzie's recovery and addressing the emotional impact on the rodeo community. The CPRA would launch its own investigation into the incident, examining everything from arena conditions to animal behavior in an effort to prevent similar accidents in the future. Dr. Williams had left her personal vehicle at the fairgrounds when she climbed into the medical helicopter, so she would spend the night at University Hospital coordinating Mackenzie's care with the trauma team. Her initial assessment during the flight had confirmed her worst fears about the severity of his injuries. The collision with Thunderstrike had caused traumatic brain injury, multiple fractures, and internal bleeding that would require immediate surgical intervention. "We're looking at a minimum of 6 hours in surgery," she explained to the trauma team as they prepared to receive the helicopter. Multiple skull fractures, possible spinal cord involvement, and compound fractures of the left leg and arm. This young man's life is going to be very different if he survives, and survival is still the primary concern at this point. The helicopter touched down on the hospital's rooftop landing pad at 11:47 p.m., and Mackenzie was rushed immediately into emergency surgery. The trauma team, led by Dr. Michael Rodriguez, no relation to Maria, had been alerted during the flight and stood ready with the equipment and expertise needed to address injuries of this magnitude. The next several hours would determine not only Mackenzie's survival, but also the extent of permanent disability he might face. As the fairgrounds gradually emptied, maintenance crews began the process of cleaning up after the abbreviated event. The arena floor where Mackenzie had fallen was carefully groomed, erasing the physical evidence of the accident while leaving the emotional impact intact for everyone who had witnessed it. The sand that had absorbed the young rider's blood would be turned and mixed with the rest of the surface, but the memory of what had occurred would remain vivid for years to come. Local news crews arrived as the last spectators were leaving, their cameras capturing footage of the empty arena and interviewing witnesses about what they had seen. The story of Lightning McKenzie's accident would spread beyond the confines of the rodeo community, reaching audiences who might never have otherwise paid attention to the sport and sparking broader conversations about athletic safety, animal welfare, and the ethics of dangerous entertainment. The Uvalde County Sheriff's Department would complete a routine investigation into the accident, interviewing witnesses and reviewing video footage to determine if any safety protocols had been violated or if equipment failure had contributed to the severity of Mackenzie's injuries. The investigation would ultimately find no evidence of negligence or wrongdoing, confirming that the accident represented the kind of inherent risk that defined professional rodeo competition. Sheriff Johnson, a lifelong rodeo fan who had been in attendance with his own family when the accident occurred, found himself grappling with personal and professional responsibilities. "This was clearly an accident," he explained to deputies reviewing the footage. "No one did anything wrong, but that doesn't make the outcome any less devastating for everyone involved. Sometimes bad things happen to good people despite everyone's best efforts to prevent them." The empty fairgrounds stood silent under the Texas stars as midnight approached, the arena lights still burning bright though the evening's entertainment had ended hours earlier than planned. The Uvalde County Fairgrounds had hosted celebrations and competitions for decades, but March 15, 2025, would be remembered as the night when the rodeo community's perception of acceptable risk was forever altered by 8 seconds that changed everything for everyone involved. If this story has already moved you, subscribe to the channel and leave your like so you don't miss any of our stories. Dawn broke gray and solemn over Uvalde County, the Texas sun struggling to penetrate the heavy clouds that had rolled in during the night like a physical manifestation of the community's collective grief. At University Hospital in San Antonio, Lightning McKenzie lay unconscious in the intensive care unit, surrounded by machines monitoring his vital signs and family members who had driven through the night from Oklahoma. The cheerful sounds of morning shift changes seemed inappropriately normal given the gravity of his condition and the uncertainty that shrouded his future. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, the neurosurgeon who had worked through the night to address Mackenzie's traumatic brain injuries, met with the family in a small conference room adjacent to the ICU. His news was measured but honest, delivered with the kind of professional compassion that comes from years of experience bearing difficult information to families in crisis. The surgical interventions had been successful in addressing immediate threats to Mackenzie's life, but the extent of his neurological recovery remained completely uncertain. The next 72 hours will be critical in determining the trajectory of Bobby's recovery, Dr. Rodriguez explained to Mackenzie's parents, Tom and Linda, who had arrived from their ranch outside Tulsa just before sunrise. "We've managed to control the bleeding and reduce the swelling in his brain, but injuries of this severity require time to reveal their full impact. We need to prepare for the possibility that Bobby's life will be very different from what any of us expected when he woke up yesterday morning." Linda McKenzie held her husband's weathered hand as they processed information that no parent should ever have to hear about their child. Their son had been competing professionally for 8 years, always careful about safety protocols, always respectful of the animals and the inherent dangers of his chosen profession. The idea that his career could end in a single moment of unexpected animal behavior felt surreal and devastating, like something that happened to other families, but never to their own. Tom McKenzie's voice was hoarse with emotion and exhaustion when he finally spoke. "Doctor, we know Bobby understood the risks when he chose this life. He's been riding bulls since he was 14 years old, and we've always supported his dreams, even though we worried every time he climbed on an animal. But this is beyond anything we ever imagined could happen. What are his chances of making a full recovery?" Dr. Rodriguez's response was carefully measured, reflecting both medical reality and appropriate hope. "Mr. McKenzie, brain injuries are among the most unpredictable conditions we treat. Some patients with injuries similar to Bobby's make remarkable recoveries, while others face permanent cognitive and physical limitations. The fact that he's young and in excellent physical condition works in his favor, but we simply won't know the full extent of his recovery potential until he regains consciousness and we can assess his neurological function." Back in Uvalde, the fairgrounds sat empty except for maintenance crews dismantling the previous night's setup with unusual quiet and solemnity. The colorful banners and sponsor displays that had created such a festive atmosphere 24 hours earlier now seemed like decorations from someone else's party, remnants of a celebration that had been permanently interrupted by tragedy. Workers moved with subdued efficiency, their usual banter replaced by hushed conversations about what they had witnessed and its implications for the future of rodeo competition. Frank Morrison stood in the stock pens where Thunderstrike was housed, studying the bull that had inadvertently changed so many lives in the span of 8 seconds. The massive animal showed no signs of distress or unusual behavior this morning, grazing peacefully on hay while seemingly unaware of the chaos his performance had created. Morrison faced the difficult decision of retiring Thunderstrike from competition, knowing that the bull's marketability had been permanently damaged regardless of any investigation's conclusions about the accident. "It's not his fault," Morrison said to his ranch foreman, Jake Williams, as they observed the animal together. "Bulls don't have malicious intent like people sometimes think. They just respond to situations with the tools nature gave them: size, strength, and instinct. But the reality is that no rodeo committee will want to take the risk of putting him in an arena again, not after what happened last night. The insurance alone would be prohibitive. The decision would cost Morrison's company significant money, as Thunderstrike represented a substantial investment in breeding, training, and marketing that had taken years to develop. More importantly, it highlighted the emotional bonds that stock contractors develop with their animals, relationships that make the business of providing dangerous entertainment far more complex than outsiders might understand. Thunderstrike wasn't just a commodity. He was an athlete in his own right, and his career was ending through no fault of his own. In San Antonio, Maria Rodriguez called in sick to work at Methodist Hospital, unable to focus on her nursing duties while processing what Sophia had witnessed at her first professional rodeo. The 8-year-old had slept fitfully, waking several times during the night with questions about the injured cowboy and concerns about whether he would recover. The experience had shattered Sophia's romanticized view of rodeo competition, replacing her dreams of barrel racing with anxiety about the dangers inherent in any sport involving large animals. "Maybe we could find you a different hobby," Maria suggested gently as they sat together over breakfast, noting the dark circles under her daughter's eyes. "Something that doesn't involve such big animals or dangerous situations. You've always loved horses. Maybe we could look into regular riding lessons instead of rodeo competition." Sophia's response reflected the complexity of the situation and the resilience of childhood curiosity. While she remained frightened by what she had seen, she also felt drawn to support the cowboy who had been hurt and to understand more about the sport that could produce both such excitement and such tragedy. Her 8-year-old mind was struggling to process the contradiction between the entertainment value of rodeo and the very real consequences when things went wrong. "I want to send the cowboy a card," Sophia said quietly, her small voice carrying the kind of genuine compassion that children often demonstrate more clearly than adults. "Maybe if lots of people send him cards, it will help him get better faster. Do you think he can read them in the hospital?" Maria felt tears welling up at her daughter's response, recognizing the teaching moment that had emerged from tragedy. I think that's a wonderful idea, Mija. We can make a card together, and I bet there are lots of other people who want to do the same thing. Sometimes when people are hurt, knowing that others care about them really does help with healing. At the Uvalde County Sheriff's Department, investigators continued reviewing video footage from the previous night's event, looking for any evidence of equipment failure, safety protocol violations, or other factors that might have contributed to the accident's severity. The recordings showed clearly that McKenzie's ride had been progressing normally until Thunderstrike's sudden direction change, an action that fell within the range of expected bull behavior despite its tragic consequences. Sheriff Johnson, who had been present with his own family when the accident occurred, found himself grappling with both personal and professional responsibilities as he oversaw the investigation. This was clearly an accident, he explained to Deputy Martinez, who was reviewing the footage frame by frame. No one did anything wrong, no safety protocols were violated, and the equipment was all functioning properly. But that doesn't make the outcome any less devastating for everyone involved, especially the McKenzie family. The sheriff's office would complete its investigation within 48 hours, finding no evidence of negligence or safety violations that could have prevented the accident. However, the process served to highlight the complex legal and ethical questions surrounding entertainment industries that involve inherent physical danger to participants, raising broader questions about liability, responsibility, and the limits of acceptable risk in professional sports. Earl Patterson spent the morning on his front porch, drinking coffee and thinking about the conversation he needed to have with his grandson Tyler about the future of his rodeo aspirations. The boy's dreams of professional competition had been dealt a serious blow by witnessing McKenzie's accident, and Earl understood that his guidance during this critical period could influence Tyler's entire future trajectory in ways that extended far beyond rodeo competition. When Tyler finally emerged from the house, his eyes red from a sleepless night, his grandfather was ready with the wisdom that comes from decades of involvement in rodeo culture and a lifetime of making difficult decisions about risk and reward. "What happened last night was terrible," Earl began, setting down his coffee cup and giving Tyler his full attention. "But it doesn't invalidate everything that rodeo represents or all the positive things the sport has given to generations of young people." Tyler's response came after a long silence, reflecting the internal struggle that many young competitors would face in the wake of McKenzie's accident. "But Grandpa, what if that was me lying in that arena? What if I ended up in the hospital fighting for my life because I wanted to ride bulls? Would it be worth it then?" The question struck at the heart of the broader challenges facing the rodeo community, forcing experienced participants to re-examine assumptions about acceptable risk that had gone unquestioned for generations. Earl's answer would come after careful consideration, representing not just his personal philosophy, but the collective wisdom of a culture built around the principle that meaningful achievement often requires accepting significant risk. "Son, life is full of risks, and some of the most worthwhile things we do carry the greatest potential for both triumph and tragedy," Earl said finally. "The question isn't whether the sport is dangerous. We've always known it is. The question is whether the values it teaches, the character it builds, the community it creates, and the personal growth it offers are worth the risks involved. That's a decision only you can make, and it's one that every serious athlete in every sport has to face." At University Hospital, Jessica McKenzie maintained her vigil at Bobby's bedside, holding his hand and talking to him despite the medical team's uncertainty about his ability to hear or comprehend her words. She spoke about their plans for the upcoming season, their hopes for his recovery, and her commitment to supporting him regardless of what the future held. The machines surrounding his bed provided constant updates on his condition, but the numbers and displays couldn't capture the human dimension of the tragedy or the love that surrounded him. "The doctors say you might be different when you wake up," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the ventilator that was helping him breathe. "But I want you to know that doesn't change anything between us. We'll figure out whatever comes next together. You're the strongest person I know, and if anyone can overcome this, it's you." Her words represented the personal dimension of the tragedy that extended far beyond the rodeo community into the realm of human relationships, family bonds, and the promises people make to each other in times of crisis. McKenzie's accident would affect not just his career but his relationships, his family's financial situation, their shared dreams for the future, and the life they had planned to build together. The CPRA announced that it would be implementing a comprehensive review of safety protocols in response to the Uvalde incident, acknowledging that while accidents couldn't be completely eliminated from a sport that involved 1,000-pound animals and human athletes, the organization had a responsibility to minimize risks wherever possible. The review would examine everything from arena construction standards to medical staffing requirements, potentially leading to significant changes in how rodeo events were conducted across the country. "We take the safety of our competitors very seriously," said CPRA President Sarah Thompson in a statement released to the media. "While accidents are an unfortunate reality in any sport, especially one that involves the interaction between human athletes and powerful animals, we are committed to learning from this incident and implementing any changes that could help prevent similar tragedies in the future." The statement reflected the challenging balance that rodeo organizations faced between maintaining the sport's traditional appeal and addressing legitimate safety concerns that could no longer be ignored. The investigation would take months to complete and would likely result in new regulations that some traditionalists would view as unnecessary interference with a sport that had always been defined by its willingness to accept risk. As afternoon turned to evening, the contrast between the previous night's excitement and the current reality became even more stark for everyone affected by the accident. The empty fairgrounds that had been filled with laughter and celebration 24 hours earlier now served as a somber reminder of how quickly life can change and how the pursuit of dreams sometimes carries costs that no one anticipates or wants to pay. Thunderstrike stood quietly in his pen, unaware that his career as a bucking bull was effectively over or that his 8 seconds of performance had triggered conversations about safety, tradition, and acceptable risk that would continue for years to come. The bull that had been bred and trained to challenge the best riders in the world had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. But his success had come at a price that no one involved in rodeo culture wanted to pay. Dr. Rodriguez made his evening rounds in the ICU, checking on Mackenzie's condition and adjusting medications based on the latest test results. The young rider remained unconscious, his brain still struggling to heal from the trauma it had sustained. The path ahead would be long and uncertain, requiring not just medical expertise, but the kind of determination and courage that had made Mackenzie successful in rodeo competition. "He's fighting," Dr. Rodriguez told Jessica during his update, noting subtle improvements in some neurological indicators while remaining cautious about long-term prognosis. Brain injury recovery is often measured in months and years rather than days and weeks, but he's showing signs that suggest his body is working to heal itself. "We just need to give him time and support." The sun set over Uvalde County on March 16, 2025, marking the end of the first full day after the accident that changed everything for everyone touched by the events at the fairgrounds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and difficult decisions for the Mackenzie family, the rodeo community, and everyone who had witnessed the collision between dreams and reality that occurred in 8 seconds of violence and courage. In intensive care units and hospital waiting rooms, in empty arenas and quiet ranch houses, in the hearts and minds of everyone who loved rodeo culture, the process of healing and understanding had begun. The questions raised by Lightning McKenzie's accident would take years to answer fully, but the love, support, and determination of the rodeo community provided hope that whatever future awaited, no one would face it alone. The night that changed Uvalde forever had ended, but its impact would continue to resonate through the lives of everyone it touched, reminding them that the difference between triumph and tragedy in professional sports can be measured in split seconds, and that the courage to pursue dreams always comes with the risk of seeing those dreams shattered. In the end, the story of Lightning McKenzie and Thunderstrike became more than just a rodeo accident. It became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of community to provide healing in the face of unimaginable loss.